Welcome everyone to the SME South Africa podcast. I'm your host, Marina Stein, also the editor for SME South Africa. Today we are talking about being growth-oriented and accessing debt for high-growth enterprises. Business growth is the difference between thriving and surviving. It helps entrepreneurs diversify their offerings, capture new market opportunities, and build resilience against economic fluctuations. To achieve growth, especially high growth, you need economic enablers, one of which is funding. Our guest understands this. Her current role sees her helping SMEs grow and enable them to be growth-oriented. So welcome to our guest, Mapule Pathela, Head of Post-Investment Function at the IDF Capital. She holds an MBA and ESG strategy training from Oxford. Mapule is also a board observer and member of subcommittees such as Audit and Risk, which enhances governance in portfolio companies. Her current role sees her support SME growth and funding solutions and sustainable value creation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Marina.
So, as I mentioned before, you're part of a team that enables growth for SMEs. What is a high growth entrepreneur?
There are different types of entrepreneurs, right? So when we're talking about what makes up a high growth business, we're looking at a business that is intentional about scaling, right? So it's a business that is actively scaling and growing every day. It's businesses that are conscious about their strategy. They know where they're going. They're conscious about their market demand, how to improve that. They're conscious about where they sit financially, and they're conscious about having a bigger footprint. So it's more about being intentional. You can get two business owners with the exact same business, right? Let's use a simple example like a clothing store, right? You can have one entrepreneur who's happy just breaking even and making a profit, right? They're able to sustain themselves. But for a high growth entity, it goes beyond just satisfying what the founder needs, right? It goes beyond that. It goes towards building something bigger and having a bigger impact in society, like creating jobs and, just doing more as a business that will sustain more than just the founder and the entrepreneur.
So in the current economic climate, businesses are really finding themselves in dire straits. You have to almost keep a tight leash on your finances, your expenses, where you can cut, you have to cut. We also see the consumer's buying power decrease, so the income is also shrinking.
Right.
Why should entrepreneurs be growth-oriented?
I think that, like you mentioned, right, there's so much going on in the world. Costs are they're vital, right? I mean, if you're trying to increase your profit in a business, right, you mentioned the two elements. Either you're going to increase your revenue or you're going to decrease your costs. If costs that you can't control are increasing, right, you need that financial discipline. And if buying power, like you mentioned, is reducing, that's actually affecting your top line. So you need to be able to grow and be agile enough to deal with the world that we live in. The volatile, the uncertain, the complex, ambiguous world that we live in. You need to not stay small forever. If you stay small forever, right, one little thing can shake you up. Just like now, right, what's happening in the Middle East, then that just throws you off. Having one customer, that throws you off. So consciously thinking about growth is more about survival. It builds resilience, right? And it helps you to stay relevant because you're constantly thinking about, okay, who is my customer? What do they need? How are their changes changing as their buying power changes, or their needs, or their lifestyle changes, right? It also depends on the type of product that you have, and fully understanding what type of product you have, or what type of service that you offer, and is it still relevant in that day and age? And if not, pivot, right? And that only comes with being intentional about growth every single day and asking yourself, are we doing what our customers want, right? You have to be customer centric. You have to be able to monitor your costs and find a way of boosting your market demand constantly. And also with your revenue, right? You may need to diversify your revenue. You may need to have different streams. Like you said, different things are more sensitive to changes in the price or macroeconomic factors. So you constantly need to find ways of ensuring that you stay on top of everything as a business and you're able to survive.
Do you have some advice on how business owners can understand their customer better to identify where they should pivot when they need to?
I would advise, obviously it depends on the type of business that you have, right? But I would advise constantly speaking to your customer and also keeping track of trends, right, that are happening. I think a good example, which we've seen, is like Woolworths, for example, right? They've seen how their customer base is more about the greens, sustainability. So you can see that when you walk into their stores, right? You can see how the fridges have changed. You can see how they've changed the temperature. It's stuff like that where you constantly know, okay, they know the chicken, right? What they feed the chicken is actually important to the customer. So it's about understanding your customer and their changing needs and adapting to that. Obviously, if you're a smaller business, I guess the bright side of that is that you're able to communicate with your customers more easily, whether that be, emails people don't particularly like, but, just different ways, right? Maybe you could have loyalty programs, the data that you get from that type of stuff and seeing what people are actually buying, actually checking trends within your stock, that shows you where people are pivoting, or it shows you, okay, when things are tough, people maybe lean more towards this. So it also helps you to be able to plan around what your customers like, maybe for different seasons or different times of the year. So I would just suggest fully understanding what your customer likes and also reaching out to your customers, whether it is via email or, even if you give them something to incentivize them, right, for maybe finishing a questionnaire or something, or they get a couple of points or something for free. Just, it's very important to understand your customer, because without them, what would your business be?
Yes, and you're unable to grow.
Exactly.
Because you don't know where you're growing towards.
Exactly.
So what have you noticed amongst entrepreneurs, especially the ones you work with? Are they scared of growth? Do they have imposter syndrome? Why does it feel like some of them aren't interested in growth?
I think that a lot of them, I think they are scared of growth. Not really because of a lack of ambition or anything. I think it's more about the uncertainty, right? It's more about not knowing what to expect, what comes with growth. And I think that a lot of businesses don't necessarily have support when it comes to growth, right? So it's always scary, right? Doing something new is always scary until you do it. So, they'll go from having a smaller business to something that's grown significantly, right? Which can be scary. Now they have way more employees to manage. Now they actually need to get funding. Now they need to have a strategy. They need to have financial discipline. They need to actually understand their numbers, right? So there is more pressure that comes with it. And growing up, I did grow up around a lot of entrepreneurs, and, you see the pressure that they're under, right? So it's them trying to survive while trying to grow. So they see it as it's an additional thing instead of seeing it more as a necessity, right? To survive, I have to grow. Not seeing it as, okay, I will survive and I'll grow, right? I'm just trying to break even. And I think there's also just a bit of fear when it comes to also the responsibility of success, right? It's not just about them anymore and their families, right? Now they're in charge of 50 employees versus 2, and what happens to their family. So there is more pressure around that. And I think it's about helping them, right? It's about networks. It's about them understanding that there are structures in place that can assist them to be able to manage that. I think some entrepreneurs as well fear the loss of control, right? The bigger the business gets, you have to give away some control and get other people in to assist you. I mean, if you're just one person and running every single system, it gets more complicated, right? So I think it's just a factor of things, but I think there is fear. And you did mention the imposter syndrome. I think that is also a very real thing. I mean, they'll walk into a room and there are all these bankers and investors, and it can be quite intimidating, right? So I think that, especially if you haven't grown up in an environment where, you know, you've seen, let's say, like your parents also like running their businesses, and you can kind of have a sense of familiarity and see the struggles that they went through. When you see someone going through something that you're going through, it makes it feel better. Like you're not the only one, right? So I think that there is quite a bit of imposter syndrome, but that comes with a lack of support, I'd say, in the market.
And that also ties in with non-financial support.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the support that comes after the funding, right? Now you have this money, now what? Okay, now you want to grow, but how do you grow, right? Okay, you understand your business model, but what are the next steps? How do you get to where you want to go? Yes, you know where you are right now, you know where you want to go, but how do you get there, and how do you ensure that you actually execute on that strategy? I think execution becomes very important, right? So I think support, like you said, non-financial support, that's where that becomes very important. So that's what we try to assist with the post-investment side of things, where we're looking more at, okay, now they receive the money, how do we ensure that this business actually becomes sustainable, right? Because yes, you can grow, but you can't just grow without intention or being sustainable. You can grow and then fall apart in 2 months, right? So it's about how do we ensure that this business is constantly growing and still surviving, right? And that certain things don't fall off, like quality, like service, whatever it is you were offering before. And I think that tends to happen sometimes when you're scaling up too quickly, and it throws things off in terms of like the basic things that you would be doing in your business, right? Just actually servicing your customers. Now you're more worried about this and that. So it's about having the right team. It's about strong leadership. Like you mentioned, we would try to assist in different ways, depending on the type of company and the type of help that they need, right? If it's as a board observer, there you're helping more with governance, you're helping more with strategy. It's also, it obviously depends on the type of funding that you have, but also different clients will require different things. They will call you and say, okay, can you help me with my strategy? Can you help me with executing? Can we do this? So we're always trying to find how to assist the business to grow. I mean, we also even help businesses to find other forms of funding, right? We help them to actually get ready for other forms of funding, because we understand that not all funding is the same, right? We understand that a business may need different types of funding for different things. We understand that it's more about ensuring that, yes, they're able to pay back, right? But they won't be able to pay back if they're not sustainable. And a lot of investors as well are also more impact driven, right? So they also want to see that the investment is actually yielding something outside of the financial aspect. So that's where growth support becomes very important.
Can you elaborate more on how you and your team at IDF Capital helps identify where it is that business needs support? Because I think what we also see is sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
So where do you start? That's when you have to defer to the experts such as yourself.
Exactly. I think you made an important point that sometimes you don't know what you need. You know, sometimes when you're applying for funding, right, you're not sure exactly what type of funding you need, but you know you need funding. So sometimes you'll go debt, maybe you needed equity and vice versa. So even in my team, I've also had some restructures where we said, okay, this type of funding maybe wasn't the best at the time for that business. And then we see how we can restructure that debt so that it actually helps that business, right? Because I think an important thing with debt is debt can be very scary, but debt can also be a beautiful thing if leveraged correctly. So we try to see, okay, this is the position that the company is in right now. So we'll have meetings with the company to better understand who they are, what they do, where they're trying to go, what the vision is, what their purpose is, and then how do they intend on getting to, you know, what they envision for themselves. And then from there, we're able to come up with value add plans, right? To say, okay, this is where you see yourself. This is how you think you can get there. And this is how we think we can assist you. Or we think that maybe if you tweak this a bit, it could help, you know, leverage what you're trying to do a little better. So it's really understanding the business, the core of the business, and what drives the business, what drives costs in the business, what drives revenue in the business. It's not just within the numbers, but also what drives the people, right? What retains staff. So it's really understanding the business as a whole and seeing how we can assist them. And from that, we're able to see the type of support that they need. Is it more of a governance issue? You know, so then obviously that's where the board observer could assist, or sitting on different committees where you're keeping track of what's going on the audit side or in terms of their risks, right? Ensuring that there's a proper risk register and that these risks are being addressed in a timely manner. Or it could be attending strategy sessions with them, or co-hosting these strategy sessions, explaining different concepts to different employees within the business. It really just depends on what that specific business needs, and we basically alter our solution to whatever that specific company needs. Obviously, at the time of funding, we'll probably pick up on a couple of things, maybe from the memo, and see, okay, maybe there's this risk, maybe there's a high customer concentration risk, right? And then that's something that we'll add to the value add plan. We'll say, okay, it's quite risky that you just have one big customer who accounts for 80% of your revenue. I think we should diversify that, because if anything happens to that customer, which we've actually seen with some clients, and then that just throws them off, right? So it's stuff like that, seeing, okay, this is what you came for, right? This is the funding you got. How can we ensure that the money that you have received actually provides more value than what it costs, right? Because essentially you're going to have to pay this back. But how can we use this money to ensure that whatever you're getting out of it is actually more valuable than what it's costing you? And that's where real value comes in. So that's what we try to do. We try to see how we can help take a business to the next level. One day at a time, one person at a time, one employee at a time. I mean, it's not about making a huge difference out the gate, right? You start to make small changes and they just keep growing, and the entrepreneur also becomes more confident, right? And they understand their business better. I mean, because we have lots of different businesses in different industries, my solution for a farmer is different to my solution for someone in agriculture or an engineer, right? So let's say with some of our farmers, the focus may first be on understanding their numbers, financial literacy, right? Financial discipline. And we don't start with big things. We'll just say, okay, step one, let's separate your personal expenses from your business expenses. Let's have 2 bank accounts, right? Okay, let's keep those completely separate. Now let's start to keep track of what's coming in for your business. Let's come up with an agreement where we specifically write what your salary is, So stuff like that. It just really depends. Your tone obviously changes depending on your client and what they require. Yeah.
SMEs shouldn't be fearful of their growth. But of course, to grow, you might need to look at your cash flow. The SME Funding Summit, happening on the 18th of June at the Focus Rooms, dives into funding related issues such as cash flow management. This is where you can be in the same room as funders who can help you enable your growth. Grab your tickets before they are sold out. So one of the elements that you'll dive into at the SME Funding Summit, something that you work intimately with, is high-level debt funding. Can you explore that topic for us a bit?
Okay, so very high level, pretty much high level debt funding is debt, right? So as you know, you can get capital either as debt or as equity. So with debt, that's capital that you receive that usually has interest, and it obviously needs to be repaid, right? So you get different types of debt. You get short-term debt and you get long-term debt, right? So it really comes down to what do you need the funds for? And I think it's very important to understand what you're solving for every time you apply for capital, right? Is it something that's more short term? Like, are you trying to fund a contract that you received? Are you trying to fund a purchase order? So, for example, we could have people who come and let's say they received a purchase order that they need to execute on, but they don't have the funds to execute on it. So they just need assistance with paying the supplier, right? So then we would pay the supplier directly. They would deliver, and then when the money comes in, we would take our share. So that's more short term. Versus, let's say, something more long term. Are you looking to acquire an asset? Is it asset finance that you require? So that would be maybe 3 to 5 years, right, of the repayments versus, let's say, pure funding that's 3 months or 5 months, right? So it really depends on what you require at the time, what you need the money for, and that really speaks to the type of debt that would be most useful for you. Because remember, they obviously have different, interest rates linked to them. And that is where cash flows become very important, right? That's where it's important to understand the difference between your revenue and your cash flows, right? What's in your income statement is not necessarily cash, right? Unless you're a cash business, right? It's very important to understand the accrual basis of things, right? It's important to understand that you may be making lots of revenue and you're doing very well on paper, but you're not able to keep up with your working capital, your daily expenses. And that's where cash flow becomes very important, because even when you're applying for debt and trying to figure out what type of debt you need to consider how much cash is coming in, and will I be able to, number one, pay off this debt while carrying on my operations, right? I think what I've also seen with some clients is that they haven't necessarily prioritized working capital management. They'll look at an income statement and think, oh, but I'm actually doing very well. But where's the money, right? And I think one thing to always remember is that what's in your income statement is not necessarily cash that has come in. It's money that you have earned, right? And costs that you have incurred, whether or not they've been paid. So that's where your cash flow statement also becomes very important, to really understand, okay, how much money is coming in this month, how much money is going out, and the timing of that money coming in and going out. I think what I've seen a lot is there's been a mismatch between when an entrepreneur would expect to receive money versus when they would expect to pay it. So let's say they would pay their suppliers after 60 days, but they only receive money from their customers after 90 days. So what happens to those 30 days, right? Then they're in a crunch, they can't pay salaries, then it becomes a bigger issue. And it's actually something we've seen more and more, especially with the companies that are scaling very quickly. they forget to properly plan for their working capital management, to plan for, okay, let's actually see if we can speak to our suppliers, pay them back a little later, or let's also change when we actually expect to receive money from our customers so we get that money better. So I think the timing of that and actually tracking working capital is very, very important when it comes to debt funding.
Working capital is so vital.
It is. It will make or break your business, unfortunately. Even when you're making lots of money, lots of revenue. I mean, you could be making 100 million, but if you can't keep up with what's going on daily or your suppliers and you start getting sued or taken to court, then it's an issue, right? Then your business will shut down.
I'm immediately thinking of personal finances as well. That cash flow element of you might get paid on the 28th, but you still have debit orders you have to be mindful of going off on the 1st.
Exactly.
You have to think ahead of when the expenses is going out in your business just as in your personal life.
Exactly. It's exactly the same concept. I think that's a really good example because it speaks to exactly what's happening in businesses. And also not taking that money from your business to cover your debit order on that day. That's where financial discipline is also very important, right? And keeping the two things very separate.
Very separate.
Exactly. And knowing what your salary is and taking that salary, right? And if you are taking money from the business, it's a loan, and just recording all of that, I think, becomes very, very important because you'll find yourself in a space where there are no lines, right? It's just, and you're not sure where your money is going and you lose track of everything. And I think that's something we've really tried to talk to entrepreneurs about, that it's not even about us trying to monitor what you're doing. It's just about being able to record everything appropriately. So you know exactly what's going on in your business, because then you'll know exactly how much do I need every single month, right?
That's true, because we've also seen a lot of entrepreneurs have the mindset that, oh no, it's fine, I don't have to pay myself this month because the business needs it. But then it also helps your personal finances to have a set income.
Exactly.
Whether it's 300 Rand or hopefully it's not just 300 Rand.
Yeah.
Or a little bit more, but having that consistent inflow firstly into your personal bank account, but then outflow from the business bank account so that you don't leave yourself behind.
Exactly. And I think you raise an important point because even when you do apply for funding, right, they also check your credit score, right? They check how you as an entrepreneur are doing, because at the end of the day, yes, it's about your business, but the investor is also backing the person behind the business, right? So we would look at your character as well, and also how you're able to repay things. So that also becomes very important. So it's very important to still take care of your own obligations as an individual, right? And ensure that your credit score is also where it should be, and that you also don't have judgments against your name just to keep the business alive as well. That both are very important, right? And it's also just you managing both things and ensuring that you as an entrepreneur are able to do, what needs to happen. I mean, of course, we don't necessarily just exclude people based on that. We try to understand what were the issues. And what we actually see is sometimes maybe someone just didn't pay something for 200 Rand and they had a judgment, they didn't know about it. So I think it's also very important to know what's going on with your credit score and if there are any claims against your name.
So what are some of the biggest misconceptions you see entrepreneurs have when it comes to funding, readiness, and applying for funding?
I think the first one would be that a good idea or just having a great pitch deck will get you money. I think it's important to understand that investors also want to know that the person they're giving the money to, and I say the person because obviously the entrepreneur is very important, right? And also the people within the business actually have systems in place, right? That they're not just putting the money into a hole. They know that the people who are running the business understand the numbers. They know what's going on in their business. They know what increases revenue, what could affect it. They are investing in the business as a whole, not into dysfunction, right? Not just to cover up a debt, right? They're not giving you money just to pay off someone, right? It should be such that there's value that is being created. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, where people have amazing ideas. I've been able to to be on, certain screening committees or credit committees and panels, and people have amazing ideas. But the problem is they don't really understand what they're asking for. They don't really understand how much they need. They don't really understand whether they need debt or equity, and whether it's long term or whether it's short term. So I think that starts to become a problem. Earlier I mentioned the restructures, right, where we can actually see that maybe this wasn't the best instrument at the time. So maybe now the business is actually struggling to make repayments or whatever that may be. And then we'll take it to a committee and present, a new option, or what we think we should change the debt to, or maybe even the way it's structured. So there's a lot that goes into understanding initially what type of capital you need. Are you looking for more patient capital? Are you looking to purchase something? What is the money for? Are you just funding a contract? Are you buying equipment? And how long do you think it would take for you to be able to pay everything back? And do you have enough money to sustain you on that journey? I think that's probably the biggest one.
So between making clear to whether it's a funder you're seeking investment from, or perhaps an angel investor, whatever the case may be, what advice do you have to the entrepreneur for making that clear, as well as how they're going to apply it so it's a clear value add and not just shooting in the dark?
I think I would advise that the entrepreneur makes sure that they understand the different types of capital that they're looking into, and that they understand that, okay, if I'm going for an angel investor, am I prepared to give away equity, and how much, right? And what that entails. Will I be losing some control of my company? What comes with that? Versus, let's say, with debt now, they need to understand that different institutions have different interest rates. They have different investors that prioritize different things. I would suggest looking for an institution that is in line with where you are as a business and as an entrepreneur. You get different institutions that also have investors that are invested in their supply chain, for example, and the rates may be better there. There are some funds that actually have lower interest rates, and some that give grants. Are you in a place where you can't pay any money? Are you just looking for a straight grant, or do you just need an interest-free loan? It's just really understanding, which goes back to your cash flows and why you need the money and how that relates to your growth, right? And your strategy and your purpose. So I would suggest taking the time to understand your business first, and then taking the time to understand the different types of investors and how they can assist you and your business.
And that's why I think it's so valuable for entrepreneurs to consider joining us at the SME Funding Summit, where you'll also be one of our experts speaking on the day, because you can really get down to what the different investors are and understand the different funding instruments on a deeper level.
100%. I think that hopefully they'll gain a lot from that. And I mean, they can ask a lot of pointed questions, right? A lot of questions that relate specifically to their businesses or what they want to do or what's best for them. And yeah, we're looking forward to it. And I think that as an entrepreneur, it also helps to be around other entrepreneurs, right? People who understand what you're going through, people who have been there, people who are still going through it, and networking. Networking is very important, and getting the right support from different people in different areas. So I think it will be very valuable.
Mapule, I'm so excited to have you as one of the speakers, and I really look forward to seeing you again on the day and continuing other funding related conversations with you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Marina. Thanks for having me. It was lovely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a fellow entrepreneur who you believe can benefit from this conversation. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe us on all of your favorite podcast platforms. And we hope to see you at the Funding Summit on the 18th of June. Bye-bye.